Between them lie years of misunderstanding and the refusal to accept one another. And also a single secret moment of weakness, the one that gave birth to a life and to two secrets they kept hidden from each other. Memory has a taste. For Draco Malfoy, it tasted like cheap whiskey, rain, and the salt on Hermione Granger's skin. It was a phantom sensation, one that visited him only when his occlumency shields were frayed by exhaustion or too much silence. It had been 10 years. 10 years since the war ended, leaving the world fractured and slowly healing. 10 years since that single aberrant night that didn't fit into the timeline of his life. A night that existed outside of logic, born of a desperate, drunken need to feel something other than guilt. He remembered the frantic slide of hands, the harsh sound of breath catching in a throat, the darkness of a room he couldn't even place on a map anymore. There had been no tenderness, only a collision of two people trying to outrun their ghosts. And then, the morning, the grey, unforgiving light, the empty side of the bed, the silence that screamed. Draco opened his eyes. The memory dissolved, replaced by the sterile, cold reality of his office in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. The rain was beating against the enchanted window, a relentless rhythm that matched the headache pulsing behind his temples. He was 30 years old now. The sharp edges of his youth had not softened. They had merely been honed into something quieter, deadlier. He was no longer the boy who sneered. He was the man who said nothing at all. He adjusted the cuff of his black robes, his fingers lingering on the silver signet ring. He was unspeakable in all but title, a specialist in cursed objects and high-risk magical anomalies. The Ministry used him because he was expendable, and he let them use him because it gave him something to do other than rot in the echo chamber of Malfoy Manor. A knock on the door shattered the quiet. "Enter," Draco said, his voice rough from disuse. Kingsley Shacklebolt filled the doorway. The Minister for Magic rarely came down to the lower levels personally. Draco didn't stand up. He simply leaned back in his leather chair, his face an impassive mask. "Malfoy," Kingsley said, his deep voice carrying a weight that made the shadows in the room seem to lengthen. "We have a situation." "You always have a situation, Minister, usually involving something exploding or someone dying. Which is it today?" "Neither. Yet." Kingsley stepped inside, closing the door with a flick of his wand. The locking charm clicked with a sound of finality. "This is a code black assignment. Off the books. Indefinite duration." Draco raised an eyebrow, the only sign of his interest. "I'm listening." "We've located a child, a magical anomaly. The readings we're getting, they match the energy signature of the Delacroix prophecy." Draco's fingers stilled on the armrest. The Delacroix prophecy was an obscure, dangerous piece of law, a prediction about a living key capable of unlocking or sealing the ancient ley lines of magic itself. If true, the child wasn't just a wizard. He was a weapon. "I thought that was a myth," Draco said coolly. "It's not. The child is 9 years old. His magic is becoming unstable. He needs a mentor, someone who understands dark magic, suppression and control, someone who can teach him to build shields before he tears himself and half the country apart." "And you want me to babysit?" Draco scoffed, reaching for a stack of parchment to dismiss the conversation. "Send a tutor. I deal with artifacts, Kingsley. not tantrums. "The child is being hunted, Draco," Kingsley said softly. "Remnants of the old pureblood circles know he exists. They want his power. He needs a protector as much as a teacher." Draco paused. The word hunted triggered an old itch under his skin. He knew what it was like to be prey. He knew what it was like to be looked at as a tool rather than a person. "Who is the guardian?" Draco asked, his eyes narrowing. "If the boy is 9, someone has been hiding him. Doing a damn good job of it too, if you're only finding him now." Kingsley hesitated. It was a micro-expression, gone in an instant, but Draco caught it. The minister was nervous. "The mother is protective. She has refused all ministry interference until now. She only agreed to this because the boy's accidental magic nearly brought down her house yesterday. She knows she can't do it alone anymore." "Who is she?" "Read the file." Kingsley placed a thick, cream-colored folder on the desk. Draco stared at it. He felt a strange drop in his stomach, a premonition of vertigo. He reached out, his pale hand contrasting with the dark wood of the desk, and flipped the folder open. The photograph was moving slightly. It showed a small cottage on a windswept cliff, battered by rain. And standing in the doorway, looking back at the camera with defiance etched into every line of her posture, was a woman. Draco stopped breathing. The unruly curls were tamed into a messy bun, but a few strands escaped, whipping in the wind. Her face was sharper than he remembered, the softness of girlhood stripped away by time and secrecy. Her eyes were dark, burning with a fierce, terrifying intelligence. Hermione Granger. The world tilted. The sound of the rain against the window seemed to roar in his ears. Hermione Granger, the Golden Girl, the war heroine who had vanished from the public eye 8 years ago, citing a need for a quiet life of research. "She has a son," Draco said. His voice sounded foreign to his own ears. It was flat, devoid of the chaos churning in his chest. "Yes," Kingsley said. "And the father?" "Unknown. The records are sealed. Granger has never spoken of him." Draco stared at the photo. Hermione. He hadn't seen her since the morning he woke up alone. He had assumed she hated him. He had assumed she regretted it. He had spent 10 years convincing himself that she was just a mistake, a moment of weakness. And now, she was the assignment. "I can't do this," Draco said, closing the folder. "Send Potter, send Weasley, send anyone else." "Potter is too high profile. Weasley is too soft. You are the only one with the skill set to handle this level of volatile magic, Draco. And you are the only one I trust to do what is necessary if the magic goes wrong." "What is necessary?" Draco whispered, looking up. "To contain it, at any cost." The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Draco looked at the folder again. He thought of the prophecy. He thought of Hermione, alone on a cliff, trying to hold back a tide of ancient magic with nothing but her wand and her stubbornness. He hated her for leaving. He hated himself for letting her. "Where are they?" Draco asked, standing up. The location was in the Hebrides. The coordinates led him to a desolate stretch of coastline where the sea crashed against black rocks with the violence of a lover's quarrel. It was raining here too, a cold, biting sleet that stung the face. Draco apparated to the edge of the property line. The wind immediately tore at his cloak, whipping the heavy fabric around his legs. He stood still for a moment, sensing the wards. They were impressive, layer upon layer of protective enchantments, muggle-repelling charms, disillusionment webs, ancient runic barriers. It was a fortress disguised as a home. He could feel her magical signature woven into the net, bright, logical, and fiercely warm. It made his skin prickle. He walked up the gravel path, his boots crunching loudly in the quiet. The cottage was stone, covered in ivy that clung to the walls like veins. Smoke rose from the chimney, snatched away instantly by the wind. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a traitorous, frantic rhythm. He clamped down on it with practiced occlusion, smoothing his mind into a sheet of blank ice. He was Malfoy. He was here for a job. He was not here to exhume the past. He reached the heavy oak door. He didn't knock. He raised his wand and sent a pulse of magic into the wood, a formal request for entry. A moment later, the locks clicked. 1, 2, 3. The door swung inward. Warmth spilled out, carrying the scent of drying herbs, old books, and wood smoke. It was a smell so painfully reminiscent of the library at Hogwarts that Draco almost flinched. And there she was. She was wearing a thick, oversized wool sweater and muggle jeans. She looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes that no glamour could hide, and a fine tension in her jaw. But when her eyes met his, the years evaporated. The shock on her face was raw, unguarded. Her lips parted, her breath hitching. "Malfoy," she breathed. It wasn't a greeting. It was an accusation. "Granger," he replied. His voice was cool, steady, betraying nothing. "I was told you needed a specialist." She stared at him, her hand gripping the edge of the door so hard her knuckles turned white. He saw her gaze flick over him, taking in the expensive dragon hide boots, the black coat, the silver at his throat. He saw the memory of that night flash in her eyes, a sudden darkening of the amber irises before she shoved it down behind a wall of hostility. "I asked for help," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't ask for you." "The Ministry sent the best," Draco drawled, leaning slightly on his cane, a prop he used to create distance. "Apparently, that's me. Are you going to invite me in, or shall we discuss high-risk magical containment in the sleet?" She hesitated. For a second, he thought she would slam the door in his face. The conflict in her was visible, the desperate need for help warring with the desperate need to keep him away. "It's dangerous," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. He's not like other children." "I'm not like other wizards," Draco countered softly. She swallowed hard, then stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in. Don't touch anything." Draco stepped across the threshold, the warmth of the house enveloping him. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing out the storm. The silence inside was heavy, pregnant with 10 years of unsaid words. He looked around. The hallway was cluttered with books. It was chaotic, lived in, and aggressively cozy. It was everything Malfoy Manor was not. "Where is the—" He stopped. At the end of the hallway, standing in the shadow of the staircase, was a boy. He was small for his age, with messy, dark curls that mirrored Hermione's. He was clutching a wooden toy dragon, his knuckles white. But it wasn't the hair or the toy that froze the blood in Draco's veins. It was the eyes. The boy looked up at him with a gaze that was unnervingly piercing. They were grey. Not just grey. They were the colour of a winter storm, the colour of slate, the colour of the Malfoy line. Draco felt the air leave his lungs. He looked at the boy, and the boy looked back, tilting his head to the side with a sharp, calculating expression that Draco had seen in the mirror 1,000 times. The magic in the room shifted. The air grew static, charged with electricity. The boy's magic reached out, not a wave, but a tendril, curious and sharp. It brushed against Draco's shields, and for a split second, Draco felt a sensation he had never felt before. A resonance, a hum in his blood that answered the boy's power like a tuning fork. Draco slowly turned his head to look at Hermione. She was standing with her back against the door, her face pale, her chest heaving. She wasn't looking at the boy. She was looking at Draco, her eyes wide with a terrifying mixture of defiance and panic. "This is Leo," she said, her voice brittle. Draco looked back at the child. The resemblance was subtle to a stranger, perhaps. The dark hair threw it off, but Draco saw the structure of the cheekbones. He saw the posture. He saw the grey eyes. And he felt the math of the last 10 years click into place with a horrifying, devastating precision. "Leo," Draco repeated. The name tasted like ash. The boy stepped forward out of the shadows. "Who are you?" he asked. His voice was quiet, serious. Draco stared at him, his professional mask cracking, revealing the stunned man beneath. He looked at the woman he had tried to forget, and the child he never knew existed. The conflict wasn't just about magic anymore. It was about the lie that stood between them, breathing and watching him with his own eyes. "I'm the one who's going to fix this," Draco said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, his eyes locking on Hermione's. She didn't flinch, but he saw the fear. She knew that he suspected, and she knew that the war had just begun again. "Hello, Leo," Draco said, not breaking eye contact with Hermione. "I'm Draco." The storm outside battered the windows, but the storm inside was just beginning. The silence in the hallway was not empty. It was a living thing, heavy with the dust of 10 years, and the sharp, metallic taste of a storm that had nothing to do with the weather outside. Draco stood motionless. The rain hammered against the roof, a relentless drumbeat that seemed to echo the pounding of his own heart. He forced his breath to remain even, forced his face into the marble stillness he had perfected in the darker corners of the ministry. But his eyes, those traitorous Malfoy eyes, could not tear themselves away from the boy. Leo. The child stood with a stillness that was unnatural for a 9-year-old. He didn't hide behind Hermione's legs. He stood his ground, chin slightly lifted, studying Draco with a curiosity that felt invasive. It was like looking into a funhouse mirror. The hair was all Granger, a riot of dark curls that refused to obey gravity. But the stance, the tilt of the head, the icy clarity of the irises. It was like looking at a ghost of his own childhood. "Go to your room, Leo," Hermione said. Her voice was tight, strained, like a violin string wound to the breaking point. The boy didn't move immediately. His gaze flicked from his mother to the stranger in black. "He has magic like the sea," Leo said quietly. It wasn't a question. It was an observation, delivered with unnerving certainty. Draco's fingers tightened on the silver head of his cane. The boy could sense his magical signature. That shouldn't be possible. Draco's occlumency barriers were fortress thick. He leaked nothing. Unless the boy was attuned to him. Unless the boy was... "Leo! Now!" Hermione snapped, her voice cracking. The boy frowned, a small crease appearing between his brows. a mirror image of the expression Draco wore when reading a difficult text. But he obeyed. He turned and walked up the stairs, his footsteps soft on the wooden boards. At the top of the landing, he paused and looked back once, his grey eyes locking with Draco's for a heartbeat that stretched into an eternity. Then he disappeared into the shadows. As soon as the bedroom door clicked shut upstairs, the atmosphere in the hallway shattered. Hermione turned on him. The vulnerability he had glimpsed earlier was gone, replaced by the ferocious, bristling defense of a cornered animal. She stepped into his space, her wand twitching at her side, though she didn't draw it. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed. "I told Kingsley, anyone but you." "And yet, here I am," Draco replied, his voice dropping to a low, silken drawl that masked the chaos in his mind. He took a step forward, forcing her to tilt her head up to meet his gaze. "The Ministry doesn't care about your personal vendettas, Granger. They care about the fact that your son is a walking magical bomb. And apparently, I'm the bomb squad." "He is not a bomb," she spat, her eyes flashing gold in the dim light. "He is a child. He is a vessel for the Delacroix prophecy," Draco corrected coldly. "I felt it the moment I walked in. The air in this house is saturated with unspent chaotic magic. It tastes like ozone and burnt sugar. If you think you can control that with lullabies and maternal instinct, you are delusional. I have controlled it for 9 years. And yesterday you nearly blew the roof off," Draco countered, his voice sharp as a whip. "Kingsley showed me the report, a localized gravity inversion, in the kitchen. He's 9, Granger. Most children are just learning to levitate a feather. He's bending the laws of physics by accident." Hermione flinched. The truth of it struck her, deflating her anger just enough to let the fear bleed through. She crossed her arms tightly over her chest, hugging herself as if to hold her pieces together. He was upset. It was an accident. "Magic of this magnitude doesn't care about intent," Draco said, stepping past her. He needed to move. He needed to put distance between them before he asked the question that was burning a hole in his tongue. He walked into the living room, his eyes scanning the space. It was aggressively domestic. Books were piled everywhere. On the tables, on the floor, on the mantel. A half-finished game of chess sat on a small table by the window. Draco's eyes lingered on the board. The Black King was cornered. "Don't touch anything," Hermione warned, following him. She hovered in the doorway, watching him like a hawk. "I need to run diagnostics," Draco said, ignoring her. He pulled off his black leather gloves, finger by finger, revealing the pale, long hands that had done so many terrible and necessary things. "I need to map his core stability. I need to see how deep the fracture goes." "You are not touching him." Draco turned slowly. The air between them thickened, becoming viscous, hard to breathe. "How do you propose I teach him to control his magic if I cannot assess it?" "You can instruct him verbally. You can use standard detection spells. But you will not use legilimency, and you will not use that. That dark sludge the unspeakables call magic." "Oil and water, Granger," Draco murmured, walking towards her until he was just outside her personal bubble. The scent of her, parchment, rain, and something sweet like vanilla, hit him, triggering a visceral memory of skin against skin. He shoved it down ruthlessly. "That's what we are. That's what we've always been. But right now, you need to decide what you hate more, My methods, or the idea of the Ministry locking your son in a suppression cell in the Department of Mysteries? Her face went pale. They wouldn't. They would, Draco said mercilessly. If I report that he is uncontrollable, if I report that the prophecy is active and dangerous, they will come for him, and they won't ask nicely at the door. You wouldn't, she whispered. Try me. It was a bluff. He knew, looking at her terrified face, that he would burn the Ministry to the ground before he let them cage the boy upstairs. But she didn't know that. She only knew the Draco Malfoy of the past, the one with the dark mark on his arm and the sneer on his lips. Fine, she breathed, the word torn from her. But I watch everything, every spell, every incantation. If you hurt him. I have no intention of hurting him, Draco said, turning back to the window. He looked out at the churning grey sea. I'm here to ensure he survives. And to find out the truth, he added silently. Why? Hermione asked. Her voice was softer now, laced with a genuine confusion that stung him more than her anger. Why did you take the assignment? You could have refused. Draco looked at his reflection in the dark glass. A pale, sharp-featured man who looked too old for his years. Curiosity, he lied, and the pay is exorbitant. Liar, she said. He turned to face her. She was watching him with that terrifying intelligence, the one that used to dissect him in potions class. She was looking for the cracks in his armor. Why are you really here, Malfoy? He looked at her. Really looked at her. He took in the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly, the fierce, protective set of her jaw. He wanted to scream at her. He wanted to shake her. He wanted to ask why. Why did you leave? Why didn't you say anything? Why did I wake up alone? And, most importantly, is he mine? But the question stuck in his throat. It was too big. If he asked it, and the answer was yes, everything would change. The fragile peace he had built would disintegrate. And if the answer was no, if the boy was someone else's, that might destroy him completely. So he chose the armor. He chose the cruelty that was his oldest friend. Maybe I just wanted to see what became of the Golden Girl, he sneered softly. Living in exile, hiding from the world. It's quite the fall from grace, isn't it? Hermione stiffened. Her eyes narrowed. I chose this life. I chose peace. Did you? Draco stepped closer, lowering his voice. Is this peace, Granger? Living on the edge of the world, terrified of every knock at the door, hiding your son from the very society you saved. It looks a lot like a prison to me. You know nothing about my life, she said, her voice shaking with anger. I know you run, Draco said. You ran 10 years ago. You're running now. The reference hung in the air between them, vibrating. 10 years ago. The night. He had brought it into the room, laid it on the table between them like a loaded gun. Hermione's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. That was a mistake, she said quickly. Too quickly. We were drunk. We were grieving. It meant nothing. Nothing, Draco repeated. The word felt like a shard of glass in his gut. Of course, just a biological imperative. 2 warm bodies in a cold castle. Yes, she said definitively, but her eyes didn't meet his. She looked at his chin, at his collar, anywhere but his eyes. Then why are you trembling? He asked softly. She took a sharp step back, hitting the doorframe. I want you to start the assessment. Now, before I throw you out and take my chances with the Ministry. Draco held her gaze for a long moment, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. He saw the fear in her, but he also saw the resolve. She was a fortress, and he was going to have to dismantle her, stone by stone. "As you wish," Draco said. He walked past her, his robes brushing against her arm. The contact was electric, a spark of static that made both of them flinch. He didn't stop. He walked to the stairs and began to climb, the heavy thud of his boots echoing in the house. He was going to the boy. He was going to the truth. Upstairs, the door to Leo's room was closed. Draco stood before it, his hand hovering over the knob. He felt a wave of nausea, a sudden, crushing doubt. He was a Death Eater. He was a monster. He was broken. What right did he have to protect a child? What right did he have to be in this house, breathing this air? He has magic, like the sea. The boy's words echoed in his mind. Draco closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open. The room was small, lit by a single floating orb of light. Leo was sitting on the bed, the wooden dragon in his lap. He looked up as Draco entered. The grey eyes were wide, waiting. Draco stepped inside and closed the door, leaving Hermione and her lies in the hallway. He leaned his cane against the wall and looked at the boy. "All right, Leo," Draco said, his voice stripping away the sarcasm, leaving only a quiet, serious calm. "Let's see what you can do." The boy didn't smile. He simply nodded, and the air in the room suddenly grew heavy, the pressure dropping as the magic within him stirred, recognizing its kin. Downstairs, Hermione Granger pressed her forehead against the cool wood of the banister and squeezed her eyes shut, listening to the silence, praying that her secrets would hold for just one more day. But deep down, she knew. The oil and the water had been poured into the same glass. And the shaking had already begun. The days in the Hebrides bled into one another, painted in varying shades of slate grey and bruised purple. It had been a week since Draco Malfoy had invaded the sanctuary of the cliffside cottage, and the air inside remained thick with a tension that refused to dissipate. It was a physical weight, pressing against the lungs, woven into the scent of steeping tea and old parchment. Draco arrived every morning at 9 sharp. He would apparate to the edge of the wards, his silhouette cutting a severe line against the misty horizon, and walk the gravel path with a rhythmic, measured cadence. He never knocked anymore. The wards recognized him now, admitting him with a faint, welcoming hum that grated on Hermione's nerves. It felt like a betrayal by her own magic. She spent those mornings hovering. She told herself it was supervision, a necessary precaution to ensure the former Death Eater didn't corrupt her son with dark arts. But as she stood in the shadow of the kitchen doorway, clutching a mug of tea that had long since gone cold, she knew it was something else. She was watching a terrifyingly perfect synchronization unfold. They were in the drawing room, which Draco had cleared of furniture to create a dueling stance. Leo stood in the center, his small face scrunched in concentration. Draco circled him slowly, his cane tapping a soft rhythm on the floorboards. "Stop pushing." Draco's voice floated through the room. It wasn't the sneering drawl Hermione remembered from school. It was lower, stripped of malice, replaced by a clinical, demanding patience. "You're trying to muscle the magic, Leo. You're treating it like a hammer. It's not a hammer. It's water. Let it flow." "It's too heavy," Leo grunted, his hands trembling as he tried to levitate a heavy iron cauldron Draco had transfigured from a log. It fights back. It fights because you are fighting, Draco corrected. He stopped walking and stood behind the boy, not touching him, but close enough that his shadow engulfed the child's small frame. Close your eyes. Leo obeyed instantly. Hermione's grip on her mug tightened. Her son, who argued with her about brushing his teeth, who refused to eat peas, who was wild and stubborn, listened to Malfoy as if his words were gospel. Find the center of the weight, Draco instructed softly. Don't lift it. Convince it that it wants to float. Hermione watched, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She saw Draco's hand twitch at his side, his long, pale fingers flexing as if he were manipulating invisible strings. And then she felt it. It was a vibration in the floor, a hum in the air that made the hair on her arms stand up. It was Leo's magic, wild, chaotic, smelling of ozone and sea salt. But there was something else wrapped around it, something cool and metallic, something disciplined, Draco's magic. He wasn't casting a spell. He was extending his own magical signature, wrapping it around Leo's volatile core like a brace. He was steadying him. The heavy iron cauldron wobbled, then lifted smoothly into the air. It hovered perfectly still at eye level. Leo's eyes snapped open. A grin broke across his face, bright, triumphant, and heartbreakingly familiar. I did it. Acceptable, Draco said, though the corner of his mouth twitched. Now, hold it. Consistency is harder than the initial burst. 3 minutes. Hermione stepped back into the shadows of the kitchen, her breath hitching. She felt a wave of nausea, a mix of relief and a piercing, jealous fear. She had taught Leo the theory. She had read him the books, but she had never been able to help him feel it like that. Her magic was warm, logical, structured. Leo's was elemental. And Draco Malfoy spoke the language of storms. Later that afternoon, the weather turned violent. The wind howled around the stone corners of the cottage, rattling the window panes in their frames. The lesson had moved to theory, seated at the large oak table in the library. Hermione sat in the armchair by the fire, pretending to read a book on advanced arithmancy. But she hadn't turned a page in an hour. Her eyes kept drifting to the two figures at the table. They were arguing. Or rather, Leo was asking a relentless stream of questions, and Draco was answering them with a dry wit that was disarming. But why does the wand movement matter if the intent is strong? Leo asked, spinning his wand, a practice wand Hermione had bought him, between his fingers. Because you are a conduit, not a god, Draco replied, leaning back in his chair. He looked tired. There were shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. The movement aligns your physical body with the magical flow. Ignore it, and you risk blowing off your own thumb, which, I assure you, is inconvenient. Leo laughed. It was a free, happy sound. Did you ever blow off your thumb? No, Draco said, his eyes darkening slightly as they flickered toward the fire, toward Hermione. I made other mistakes, costlier ones. The air in the room shifted. The temperature seemed to drop a few degrees. Hermione looked up, meeting Draco's gaze across the room. For a moment, the teacher and the student vanished, leaving only the man and the woman and the secret that lay between them like a buried landmine. He knows, Hermione thought, panic fluttering in her throat. He has to know. He looks at him and sees himself. But Draco said nothing. He looked back at Leo. Again, The wrist movement for Protego. The disaster happened 20 minutes later. Leo was tired. His focus was fraying. Draco was pushing him, gently but persistently, to master a shielding charm. "Focus, Leo," Draco said, his voice sharpening slightly. "The attack won't wait for you to be ready." "I'm trying," Leo snapped. His frustration spiked, and with it, his magic. The candles on the mantel flared up, the flames turning a jagged, unnatural blue. The windows rattled violently. "Control it," Draco commanded, standing up. "Pull it back." "I can't," Leo shouted. He stood up, his small fists clenched. "It's too loud." The air pressure in the room plummeted. The books on the shelves began to shake. A porcelain vase on the side table exploded, sending shards flying across the room. "Leo!" Hermione screamed, jumping to her feet, her wand instantly in her hand. "Stop!" But her voice only seemed to panic him more. The air around the boy began to warp, a whirlwind of raw, accidental magic that was gathering speed. The rug rippled like water. The glass in the windows began to crack. Hermione raised her wand to cast Finite, to bind him, to do whatever was necessary to stop him from hurting himself. "Don't!" Draco's voice cut through the chaos. It wasn't a shout. It was a command, absolute and icy. He didn't draw his wand. He stepped directly into the whirlwind. "Malfoy, get back!" Hermione yelled, terror seizing her heart. "It's unstable." Draco ignored her. He walked through the swirling debris of the exploded vase, the wind whipping his platinum hair around his face. He didn't look afraid. He didn't look like a ministry official. He looked like a man walking into a fire he knew he could survive. He reached Leo. The boy was crying now, eyes squeezed shut, terrified of his own power. Draco dropped to one knee. He didn't use a spell. He didn't shout. He reached out and grabbed Leo by the shoulders. His grip was firm, grounding. "Leo," Draco said. His voice was a low rumble, audible even over the howling wind of the magic. "Look at me." Leo shook his head, sobbing. I'm sorry. I didn't ask for an apology. I asked for your eyes. Look at me." Leo opened his eyes, and then silence. It wasn't that the magic stopped. It was that it changed. Hermione watched, frozen, as Draco's hands on the boy's shoulders seemed to glow with a faint silver light. He wasn't suppressing the boy's magic. He was absorbing the excess. He was acting as a lightning rod, taking the chaotic surge of energy and grounding it through his own body. Hermione saw Draco flinch, a spasm of pain crossing his face as the raw power hit him. His knuckles turned white, but he didn't let go. He leaned in, his forehead almost touching Leo's. "Breathe," Draco whispered. "Match my breath. In, out." Leo gasped, his small chest heaving. He stared into Draco's grey eyes, seeking an anchor in the storm, and he found it. "In," Draco commanded softly. "Out." Slowly, agonizingly, the blue flames in the fireplace settled back to orange. The books stopped shaking. The wind died down, leaving only the sound of the rain outside and the harsh breathing of the two males in the center of the room. Draco stayed kneeling for a long moment, his hands still gripping Leo's shoulders. He looked exhausted, his skin waxy and pale, but his eyes were burning with a fierce, possessive intensity. He took one hand off Leo's shoulder and brushed a curl of hair away from the boy's sweaty forehead. It was a gesture so tender, so instinctively paternal, that it knocked the breath out of Hermione's lungs. "You have a lot of power, Leo," Draco said quietly. "Never apologize for it. Just learn to command it." Leo sniffled, wiping his nose with his sleeve. He looked at Draco with total, unadulterated awe. "Did I hurt you?" "No," Draco lied smoothly, though Hermione saw the tremor in his hands as he stood up. "I've handled worse things than you, little dragon." He turned then, and his eyes met Hermione's. She was standing by the fireplace, her wand still clutched uselessly in her hand. She felt exposed, stripped bare. She had watched him calm the storm that she had birthed. She had watched him take the pain so her son wouldn't have to. The look he gave her was complicated. It was accusatory, yes. But beneath the anger and the exhaustion, there was something else. A question, a realization. He feels it too, Hermione realized. The resonance. It's not just magic, it's blood. Draco adjusted his cuffs, his face closing off again, the mask sliding back into place. But the damage was done. The walls she had built for 10 years had just developed a hairline fracture, and through it the light was pouring in. "That's enough for today," Draco said, his voice raspy. "He needs rest, and chocolate if you have it. It helps with the magical exhaustion." "I know," Hermione whispered. "I'll see myself out." He walked toward the door, limping slightly more than usual. As he passed her, he paused. He didn't look at her, but he leaned in close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, the fever heat of channeled magic. "He reacts to me," Draco murmured, low enough that Leo couldn't hear. "His magic. It knows me, Granger. Why does it know me?" Hermione's heart stopped. She stared at his profile, the sharp nose, the pale lashes, the set of his jaw. She wanted to lie. She wanted to scream. She wanted to fall into his arms and weep. "Because you're his teacher," she choked out. Draco turned his head slowly. His eyes searched hers, dissecting the lie, stripping it down to the bone. He didn't believe her. She could see it, but he didn't push. Not yet. "Tomorrow," he said. And then he was gone, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind him. Hermione stood in the wreckage of the living room. Leo was sitting on the floor, eating a piece of chocolate she had summoned, looking calm and safe. "Mum?" Leo asked, his mouth full. "Yes, darling." "Draco is strong," Leo said. "He feels like home. Not this home, but a home." Hermione let out a sob she tried to turn into a cough. She walked over and sat on the floor, pulling her son into her arms, burying her face in his dark curls. She smelled the ozone and the rain on him. And underneath that, faint but undeniable, she smelled the scent of sandalwood and expensive cologne. She was losing. She was losing the secret, and she was losing the war against her own heart. Because for a terrifying moment, when Draco had been kneeling there holding their son, she hadn't felt fear. She had felt hope, and that was the most dangerous thing of all. The archives of the Department of Mysteries were not silent. They hummed. It was a low, subsonic vibration that rattled the teeth and settled in the marrow of the bones, the sound of thousands of prophecies whispering in their sleep. Draco Malfoy sat alone at a long obsidian table, a single sphere of cold magical light hovering above his shoulder. It was 3 a.m. The rest of the world was asleep, but Draco was wide awake, staring at a scroll of parchment that felt like human skin under his fingertips. He had stolen it, or rather, he had requisitioned it without the proper clearance forms, which, for a man of his reputation, was essentially the same thing. The scroll detailed the full text of the Delacroix prophecy. For the last week, he had been treating Leo's magic like a puzzle to be solved, a mechanical failure in an engine. He had been teaching the boy control, breathing, structure. He had allowed himself to feel a dangerous narcotic pride when Leo successfully suppressed a burst of accidental magic. He had allowed himself to forget, for a few hours each day, that he was Draco Malfoy, former Death Eater, and that the boy was a job. But the text in front of him shattered that illusion. The child born of the interval, the bridge between the iron and the gold, shall be the living key. He shall not wield the power, he shall be the gate. And to open the gate, the key must be turned. Draco read the line again. The key must be turned. It wasn't a prophecy of power. It was a prophecy of sacrifice. The Ministry didn't want Leo to control his magic so he could live a normal life. They wanted him stable so he could be used. A living key was a tool, a battery, a thing to be utilized to unlock some ancient, forgotten barrier, likely at the cost of the vessel's life. Draco felt a wave of nausea roll through him. He pushed the scroll away, standing up so abruptly his chair screeched against the stone floor. He walked to the edge of the room, staring into the abyss of the atrium below. He saw his own reflection in the black glass. Gaunt, pale, the silver mask of his past hovering like a phantom over his features. He knew what it was like to be a tool. He knew what it was like to be groomed for a destiny that tasted like ash. He had been a child weapon too, and he knew, with a certainty that froze his blood, that he was the worst possible person to protect Leo. He was the Ministry's man. He was the one they had sent to groom the sacrifice. If he stayed, he would be complicit. If he stayed, he would eventually have to hand the boy over. Or worse, his own darkness, the stain on his soul that never washed out, would infect the boy. He has magic like the sea, Leo had said, but the sea drowns things. Draco made a decision. It felt like cutting off a limb, but it was the only clean thing left to do. He would resign. He would force Kingsley to assign a different handler, someone like Potter, someone with a hero complex and a moral compass that pointed true north. Someone who could save the boy from the Ministry. Draco Malfoy couldn't save anyone. He could only survive. The rain at the cottage was softer tonight, a melancholic drizzle that shrouded the cliffs in mist. It was late, past 10 o'clock when Draco arrived. He didn't use the path. He apparated directly to the porch, bypassing the wards he'd spent the week dismantling. The house was dark, save for the glow of the fire in the living room. He knocked. A single, sharp rap. A moment later, the door opened. Hermione stood there, wrapped in a thick, knitted blanket, her hair loose and wild around her shoulders. She held a book in one hand and her wand in the other. When she saw him, her shoulders dropped an inch, the defensive posture easing into something confusingly welcoming. "Malfoy," she whispered, glancing at the darkness behind him. "Is everything all right? It's late." "We need to talk," he said. His voice was devoid of inflection. He didn't step inside. He stayed on the porch in the cold, damp air, refusing the warmth she offered. Hermione frowned, stepping aside. "Come in. You'll catch your death." "No." She froze, her hand on the doorframe. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the walls he had erected. The ice was back. The sneer was gone, replaced by a blank, terrifying neutrality. "What happened?" she asked, her voice hardening. "I'm resigning from the assignment," Draco said. He watched the words hit her. He watched the confusion morph into shock, and then into panic. "I've already sent the owl to Shacklebolt." He'll send a replacement in the morning. Potter, most likely. Or Weasley. What? Hermione stepped out onto the porch, ignoring the cold. The blankets slipped from her shoulders, puddling on the floor, but she didn't notice. You can't. We made progress. Leo trusts you. Leo is a child, Draco said harshly. He trusts anyone who gives him chocolate and doesn't yell. He'll adjust. He won't. Hermione's voice rose, cracking in the night air. He doesn't connect with people, Draco. You saw him. With you, it's different. The magic, it listens to you. That is exactly why I'm leaving. Draco turned away, looking out at the black ocean. He couldn't look at her face. If he looked at her face, he would remember the way she had looked at him 10 years ago. Flushed, alive, hers. And he would break. What are you talking about? She was behind him now. He could feel her heat. Do you know what the prophecy actually says, Granger? He turned back, his eyes flashing. Kingsley didn't give you the full text, did he? Of course not. He needs you compliant. Tell me, she demanded, though her voice wavered. The living key. Draco spat the words out like poison. That's what your son is to them. Not a wizard, a key. Keys are meant to be turned, Granger. They are meant to be used to open doors that should stay shut. If I stay, my job isn't to teach him. It's to prepare him for the lock. Hermione paled, her skin turning the color of moonlight. She stumbled back a step, her hand flying to her mouth. No. Kingsley said it was just about containment. Kingsley is a politician, Draco said brutally. And I am his cleaner. I clean up the messes. I handle the dark artifacts. I dispose of the dangerous things. And right now, your son is the most dangerous thing in Britain. So you're running away. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a scream. You're leaving him to them? I am leaving so that Potter can step in, Draco said, his voice straining. Potter will fight for him. Potter is a hero. I am not that. You think Harry can teach him? Hermione laughed, a high, hysterical sound. Harry is pure instinct. He doesn't understand the structure of suppression. He doesn't understand the darkness that Leo feels. You do. And that is the problem, Draco shouted. The mask slipped. The agony broke through. I understand the darkness because I am made of it. Do you want that for him? Do you want a former Death Eater shaping his mind? Do you want me to teach him how to be a weapon? Because that is all I know how to do. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving. The silence that followed was deafening. I am poison, Granger, he whispered, his voice broken. I ruin things. I ruined my life. I ruined my family name. I will not ruin him. He turned to leave. He took a step toward the edge of the porch, intending to disapparate into the oblivion of the night. Draco. It wasn't a command. It was a plea. And then she touched him. Her hand closed around his forearm, his left forearm, right over the mark that was hidden beneath the black wool of his coat. The contact was like a physical blow. Time collapsed. Suddenly, he wasn't on a porch in the Hebrides. He was back in that room 10 years ago. The rain was beating against a different window. The fire was dying in the grate. He was drunk on fire whiskey and grief, and she was there, her eyes swollen from crying, her hands reaching for him not in anger, but in a shared, desperate need for oblivion. He remembered the heat of her skin, the way she had gasped his name against his mouth, the way she had touched the mark then too. not with disgust, but with a strange, sorrowful reverence, kissing the faded black ink as if she could suck the poison out of his blood. The memory washed over him, visceral and overwhelming. He froze. He couldn't move his arm. He couldn't breathe. Slowly, he looked down at her hand. Her fingers were gripping his coat tightly, her knuckles white. "Don't go," she said. Her voice was steady now, grounded in that terrifying Gryffindor bravery. "I don't care about the ministry. I don't care about the prophecy. I care about my son, and I see how he looks at you." She stepped closer. The space between them vanished. She was looking up at him, her eyes searching his face, seeing past the occlumency, past the scars, past the lies. "You are not poison," she whispered. "You are the only one who has ever made him feel safe." "Hermione," he breathed. It was the first time he had used her given name in years. It felt unauthorized, intimate. "You say you're made of darkness," she continued, her thumb brushing against the fabric of his sleeve, tracing the line of the bone beneath. "But you're the one holding the light for him. If you leave, he will think it's his fault. He will think he was too much for you. Please, don't do that to him." "Don't do that to me," her eyes said. Draco stared at her. He felt the resolve crumbling, the sturdy walls of his self-hatred buckling under the weight of her belief in him. He wanted to pull away. He wanted to save her from himself. But the warmth of her hand on his arm was a tether he couldn't sever. He looked at the door of the cottage. He thought of the boy sleeping upstairs, the boy with the grey eyes and the toy dragon, the boy who was a key, the boy who was mine? The question pulsed in the silence, louder than ever. If he left now, he would never know. And if he left now, he would be abandoning them both to the wolves. Draco let out a long, ragged sigh. His posture slumped, the fight draining out of him. He covered her hand with his own. His gloved fingers wrapped around hers, not to push her away, but to hold her there. "If I stay," he said, his voice rough, "I do it my way. No ministry interference. No reports to Kingsley. We lock this place down. We teach him to hide the magic, not just control it. We make him useless to them." Hermione's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, a jerky motion. "Okay, yes, your way." "And you," Draco said, looking down at her, his gaze intense and unyielding. "You stop hiding from me. No more secrets, Granger. If we do this, we are allies. Fully." Her breath hitched. She looked terrified, but she didn't look away. "Allies. Good." He didn't let go of her hand. For a moment, they just stood there, suspended in the amber of the moment. The former enemies, the secret lovers, the terrified parents. The tension between them was a tangible thing, a cord pulled tight, humming with the memory of the night they had tried to forget. Draco leaned in, just an inch. He smelled the rain on her hair and the vanilla of her skin. He wanted to kiss her. The urge was so strong, it was almost painful. He wanted to finish what they had started 10 years ago. But he pulled back. Not yet. The truth was still a ghost between them. "Go inside, Hermione," he said softly, releasing her hand. The loss of contact made his skin ache. "I'll be back tomorrow at dawn. We have work to do." She nodded, hugging the blanket around herself again, suddenly looking small. "Thank you, Draco." She turned and went back inside. The door closed and the lock clicked. Draco stood alone in the dark. He raised his left hand, the one she had touched, and pressed it against his chest, right over his heart. It was beating fast, a frantic, rhythmic thud. He wasn't leaving. He was staying. He was walking willingly into the trap. And for the first time in 10 years, he wasn't doing it for himself. He looked up at the window where the boy slept. "I won't let them turn you," he vowed to the silent night. Then, with a crack that sounded like a gunshot, he disapparated, leaving only the smell of ozone and the heavy weight of the unsaid lingering in the mist. The storm that hit the Hebrides 3 days later was not a weather event. It was a siege. The sky had collapsed into a bruising shade of charcoal, and the sea rose up to meet it, turning the world outside the cottage windows into a wall of churning water and violence. Inside, however, the world had shrunk to the size of a single room, illuminated by the golden, wavering light of the hearth. Draco Malfoy had been trapped here for 48 hours. The wards were holding, but the apparition points were unstable due to the sheer atmospheric pressure of the gale. He could have risked it. He had risked worse. But when the wind first began to howl, Hermione had looked at him, her hand tightening on the back of a chair, and said, "Stay, please." And so he had stayed. The cottage, once a place of tension, had settled into a strange, suspended reality. It was a domesticity that felt stolen, a fragile bubble existing outside of time. Draco sat in the high-backed velvet armchair, a book of advanced defensive theory open on his lap, though he hadn't read a sentence in 20 minutes. His attention was fixed on the rug in front of the fire. Leo was lying on his stomach, chin propped in his hands, staring at a chessboard. Opposite him sat Hermione, cross-legged, wearing thick wool socks and a sweater that was unraveling at the cuff. "Check," Hermione said softly, moving her knight. Leo groaned, a sound of theatrical despair that made Draco's lips twitch. The boy raked a hand through his dark curls, leaving them standing up in messy spikes. Draco's breath hitched. He watched Leo's hand drop from his hair to the table, fingers drumming a rapid, impatient rhythm against the wood. Tap, 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 tap. Draco looked down at his own hand, resting on the arm of the chair. He did the exact same thing when he was thinking. It was a nervous tic he had developed in his 6th year. He looked back at the boy. Leo was chewing his lower lip, eyes narrowed, calculating. He reached out, hovered his hand over a bishop, then hesitated. He pulled back. He tilted his head to the left, squinting. It was like watching a memory play out in real time. "Don't sacrifice the bishop, Leo," Draco murmured, his voice cutting through the crackle of the fire. "It's a trap. She's luring you into the open." Hermione looked up, her eyes meeting Draco's. There was a flicker of something in them. Fear? Guilt? It was gone before he could decipher it. "No coaching from the audience," she chided gently, though there was no heat in it. "It's not coaching, it's mercy," Draco drawled. He closed his book and set it aside, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "If he moves the bishop, you'll take his queen in 3 moves. It's a classic Granger offensive. Aggressive logic disguised as an opening." Leo looked from the board to Draco, his grey eyes wide. "Really? Really? Look at the board, Leo. Don't look at the pieces you want to take. Look at the space she's leaving empty. Why is it empty?" Leo frowned. The expression, the furrow of the brow, the slight tightening of the jaw, was so painfully familiar that Draco felt a phantom ache in his chest. The boy studied the board again. Slowly, the realization dawned. "She's baiting me," Leo whispered. "Precisely," Draco said. "So, what do?" Leo grinned. It was a sharp, dangerous grin. He picked up his rook and slammed it down on a completely different square. I changed the battlefield. Hermione let out a surprised laugh as her strategy crumbled. Well, that was rude. That was Slytherin, Draco corrected softly. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with the unspoken. Hermione looked at Leo, who was beaming at Draco, seeking approval. Then she looked at Draco, who was looking at Leo with an expression of profound, terrifying softness. The resemblance was no longer just physical. It was in the cadence of their silence. It was in the way they both held themselves, guarded, proud, but desperate for connection. It was in the magic that hummed between them, a shared frequency that made the very air in the room vibrate. Hermione stood up abruptly. "Tea," she said, her voice sounding breathless. "I'm going to make more tea." She fled to the kitchen. Draco watched her go, his eyes narrowing. He felt the tension radiating off her, a tangible wave of panic. He looked back at Leo. "Draco?" the boy asked. Do you have a family?" The question was innocent, but it landed like a stone. Draco looked into the grey eyes that were so much like his own. "My parents are at the manor," Draco said carefully. "We are not close." "I don't mean parents," Leo said. He picked up the Black King, turning it over in his small fingers. "I mean, do you have a boy? Like me?" Draco felt a cold hand squeeze his heart. "Do I?" The question hung there, suspended in the amber light. He wanted to say no. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to tear the world apart to find the answer. "No, Leo," Draco whispered. "I don't have a boy." Leo nodded solemnly. "That's sad. You'd be a good dad. You know how to explain things without making me feel stupid." Draco swallowed hard, fighting the sudden burn of tears in his throat. He reached out, compelled by a force he couldn't name, and placed his hand on top of Leo's head. The boy's hair was soft. "Time for bed, Leo." Hermione's voice came from the doorway. She was leaning against the frame, holding a tray, her face pale. She had heard. Leo sighed, but he didn't argue. He stood up, abandoning the game. "Good night, Draco." "Good night, Leo." Draco watched him walk up the stairs. He listened to the footsteps fade. Then silence descended. It was just the two of them now, and the storm, and the truth. Hermione set the tray down on the low table between the armchairs. There was no tea. There was a bottle of fire whiskey and 2 heavy crystal tumblers. Draco raised an eyebrow. "I thought we were having tea." "I changed the battlefield," she murmured, echoing her son's words. She poured a generous measure into both glasses. Her hands were shaking. She sat down opposite him, curling her legs under her. She looked exhausted, her defenses worn thin by the long days and the claustrophobic intimacy of the storm. "To the storm," she said, raising her glass. "To the shelter," Draco replied quietly. They drank. The whiskey burned a familiar, grounding heat. It tasted of peat and smoke and bad decisions. It tasted like 10 years ago. Draco watched her over the rim of his glass. The firelight played across her face, softening the lines of worry, highlighting the curve of her throat. She was beautiful. Not in the polished, pristine way of the women his mother tried to set him up with. She was beautiful in a way that hurt, messy, real, vital. "He likes you," Hermione said, breaking the silence. She was staring into the fire. "He is a bright boy," Draco said. "He takes after you." "Does he?" Hermione turned to look at him. Her eyes were dark, searching. "I see so much of the world in him, but sometimes when I look at him, I see things I can't explain." "Like what?" Draco's voice was low, dangerous. He was pushing her. He wanted her to say it. He needed her to say it. "Like the way he stands," she whispered. "The way he holds his anger. The way he looks at me when he thinks I'm lying." Draco set his glass down. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. "And does he know you're lying, Granger?" Hermione flinched. "I don't lie to him." "You lie to everyone," Draco said. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees, invading her space. "You've been lying for 10 years. You're lying right now." "Draco, why did you leave?" The question was out. It wasn't about the boy anymore. It was about them. It was about the wound that had never healed. Hermione's breath hitched. She looked at his hands, then up to his face. "I was scared." "Scared of what?" "Of me." "Of us," she confessed. The words were barely audible. Of what it meant. You were lost, Draco. You were drowning in guilt. And I was trying to be strong for everyone. For Harry, for Ron, for the world. That night, it wasn't just comfort. It was a collision. It felt too real. And I knew, if I woke up next to you... "What?" Draco urged, his voice rough. "I knew I wouldn't be able to leave," she whispered. "I knew I would fall in love with you, and I couldn't do that. Not then. Not when the world was still burning." Draco closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the blow. She hadn't left because she hated him. She had left because she felt too much. "And now?" he asked, opening his eyes. "The world isn't burning anymore, Hermione. It's just raining." She laughed, a wet, choked sound. "It's always raining with you." "Maybe," he conceded. He reached out. It was a slow, deliberate movement. He took the glass from her hand and set it on the table. Then he took her hand. Her skin was warm. Her pulse was fluttering like a trapped bird against his palm. "I woke up alone," Draco said, his voice dropping to a murmur that vibrated in her bones. "I waited. For weeks. I thought you would write. I thought you would come back. When you didn't, I assumed I was just a mistake, a way to feel something." "You were never a mistake," she said fiercely, her fingers tightening around his. "You were the only real thing in that entire year." The air between them thickened, becoming viscous with desire and regret. The 10 years of silence seemed to evaporate, leaving only the man and the woman and the undeniable magnetic pull that had drawn them together in the first place. Draco pulled gently on her hand. She didn't resist. She leaned forward, drawn by his gravity. "Hermione," he breathed. He looked at her mouth. He remembered the taste of it. He remembered the sound she made when he kissed the hollow of her throat. "I can't help but think," Draco whispered, echoing the thoughts that had plagued him for a decade, "that we wasted a lot of time." "We had to grow up," she said, her eyes locked on his lips. "We had to be ready." "Are we ready?" Hermione didn't answer. She leaned in closer. Their faces were inches apart. He could feel her breath on his cheek. He could smell the vanilla and the whiskey. The moment stretched, agonizing and perfect. The inevitable slide toward each other. Draco's hand moved up her arm, to her shoulder, to the nape of her neck. His thumb brushed the soft skin behind her ear. She shivered, her eyes fluttering shut. "Kiss her," his mind screamed. "Claim her. Take back the years." But then, a sound. A floorboard creaked upstairs. It was faint, but in the silence of the cottage, it was a thunderclap. Leo. Hermione's eyes snapped open. She pulled back, gasping, as if waking from a trance. She scrambled back into her chair, her hand flying to her chest. I can't, she whispered, panic flooding back into her eyes. Draco, I can't. Not while there are still secrets. Draco froze. His hand was still suspended in the air where she had been. He slowly lowered it, his fingers curling into a fist. Secrets. He looked at her. He saw the terror in her eyes. And he knew. She wasn't talking about her secret. She was waiting for him to figure it out. She was waiting for him to ask the question that would shatter everything. But he couldn't. Not tonight. Not when they were so close. If he asked and she confirmed it, the anger would return. The betrayal would wash away the tenderness, and he wasn't ready to lose this fragile piece. Not yet. Right, Draco said, his voice hoarse. He picked up his whiskey and downed it in one swallow. It burned, but not enough to numb the ache. Secrets. He stood up, the movement stiff. It's late. I'll take the couch. Draco. Go to bed, Hermione, he said, turning his back on her to stare into the dying fire. Before I do something we both regret. He heard her hesitate. He heard the rustle of her clothes. And then he heard her soft footsteps retreating toward the stairs. Good night, she whispered. Draco didn't answer. He waited until he heard her bedroom door click shut. Then he sank back into the chair. He looked at the chessboard, still frozen in the aftermath of the game. The Black King was safe, but isolated. He looked at the empty glass. He looked at his own reflection in the dark window. And then he looked up at the ceiling, toward the room where the boy slept. The boy who played chess like a Slytherin. The boy who rubbed his head when he was tired. The boy who had grey eyes. Draco closed his eyes and let the truth wash over him, cold and undeniable. It wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was a certainty that settled in his gut like lead. He is mine. She stole him. She hid him. And I am falling in love with a woman who betrayed me. Outside, the storm raged on, battering the walls of the cottage. But inside Draco Malfoy, the real storm had just begun. The air in the cottage had turned brittle. For 3 days following the storm, the silence between Draco and Hermione had not been peaceful. It had been the held breath of an executioner before the blade drops. Draco arrived at dawn and left at dusk. He was precise, professional, and utterly cold. The moments of shared warmth, the chess games, the whiskey by the fire, felt like hallucinations from a fever dream. He spoke only to Leo, and even then, his voice lacked the gentle patience it had held before. Now, it was steel wrapped in velvet. He was pushing the boy. He was testing the hypothesis. Hermione watched it happen with a sickening sense of inevitability. She stood in the doorway of the library, her fingers twisting the fabric of her sleeve, watching Draco pace around her son. She wanted to intervene, to scream at him to stop, but she was paralyzed by the guilt that had been rotting in her gut for a decade. She knew that he suspected. She saw it in the way his eyes lingered on Leo's hands, on the curve of his nose, on the way the boy sneered when he was frustrated. Draco was looking for proof, and today the universe decided to give it to him. Again, Draco commanded. Leo stood in the center of the room, sweating. His face was pale, his dark curls plastered to his forehead. I'm tired, Draco. Please. The enemy doesn't care if you're tired, Leo, Draco said, his voice devoid of sympathy. The enemy waits for you to be weak. Clear your mind. Build the wall. I can't find the bricks, Leo whispered, his voice trembling. Then find the mortar, Draco snapped. Occlumency is not about strength. It is about organization. Order your thoughts. Hide the core. Again. Draco raised his wand. He wasn't casting a spell, but he was projecting a mental probe. A soft legilimency attack designed to test the boy's natural defenses. Draco, that's enough. Hermione stepped forward, her voice sharp. He's exhausted. You're pushing him too hard. Draco didn't look at her. His eyes were locked on Leo. He is the vessel of a chaotic prophecy, Granger. If he cannot shield his mind, he will be possessed by the first dark artifact he touches. Or worse, the magic will eat him from the inside out. Do you want him safe, or do you want him comfortable? I want him to stop shaking. Then he needs to learn to control the fear, Draco said. He took a step closer to Leo. Look at me, Leo. Don't look at your mother. She can't help you in here. He tapped his own temple. Open your eyes. Leo looked up. The grey eyes were swimming with tears, but behind the tears, the magic was churning. It was a dark, volatile ocean, whipped into a frenzy by exhaustion and the pressure Draco was applying. I said, shield, Draco commanded, and he pushed. It was meant to be a tap, a nudge, but Leo's control snapped. The scream that tore from the boy's throat wasn't human. It was the sound of raw magic fracturing reality. Boom. The library windows exploded outward. The shards of glass didn't fall. They hovered in the air, caught in a stasis field of accidental magic. The floorboards rippled like liquid. The air pressure dropped so sharply that Hermione's ears popped. Leo! Hermione lunged forward, but a wall of invisible force threw her back against the doorframe. She slid to the floor, gasping for breath. Leo was floating. His feet had left the ground, his body arched in a rictus of agony. Dark, inky tendrils of smoke were pouring from his skin, swirling around him, forming shapes that looked like claws, like teeth. The prophecy was waking up. It hurts, Leo screamed. Make it stop. Draco stood his ground. The wind was whipping his robes around him, but he didn't retreat. He saw the danger. The boy's mind was collapsing under the weight of the ancient magic. If he didn't stabilize the core, Leo's mind would shatter. There was only one way. I'm coming in, Draco roared over the noise of the storm. He didn't use his wand. He lunged forward, grabbing Leo's wrists, pulling the boy down from the air. The contact burned. It felt like grabbing a live wire. Draco gritted his teeth, forcing his own mind to open, forcing his own consciousness to bridge the gap. Legilimens. The world of the library vanished. Draco was plunging into the dark. It was cold here, a freezing void filled with the debris of a child's panic. He saw flashes of memory flying past him, like debris in a tornado. A toy dragon, the taste of chocolate, the smell of Hermione's perfume, the fear of the dark. Focus, Draco told himself. Find the core. Find the anchor. He pushed deeper, swimming against the current of Leo's magic. He needed to find the center of the boy's consciousness and build a wall around it before the prophecy consumed him. He found it. A small, glowing light in the center of the darkness. Leo's soul. Draco reached for it, intending to wrap his own mental shields around the boy. But as he touched the light, the connection flared. It wasn't just a mental link anymore. It was biological. It was blood calling to blood. The resistance vanished. Leo's mind didn't fight him. It welcomed him. It recognized the signature. And then the memories shifted. Draco wasn't seeing Leo's memories anymore. He was seeing the genetic imprint, the deep cellular memory that every child carries of their creation. The magic was showing him the source. Suddenly, Draco was no longer in the void. He was in a room. That room. He saw the rain beating against the castle window. He saw the fire dying in the grate. But he wasn't looking at it with his own eyes. He was seeing it through her eyes. He saw himself. He saw Draco Malfoy at 20 years old, pale and broken, standing by the bed. He saw the desperation on his own face, the hunger, the raw vulnerability that he had never shown anyone else. He felt the overwhelming wave of emotion that Hermione had felt in that moment. Not just pity, not just lust, but a fierce, blinding love. He is so broken, the thought echoed in the memory. I want to fix him. I want to save him. He felt her hands reaching for him. He felt the moment their souls had collided, the spark of life igniting in the darkness. The vision shifted. He saw a baby, a newborn with grey eyes. He felt the fierce, terrifying protectiveness of a mother holding a secret. He looks like him, Hermione's voice whispered in the memory. He looks exactly like him. I can never tell him. If the Ministry knows, if Lucius knows, they will take him. They will turn him into a weapon. I have to hide him. I have to hide him from Draco. From Draco. The name echoed in the void, a sentence and a betrayal all in one. Draco gasped, tearing himself out of the trance. He slammed back into his own body with a violence that sent him staggering backward. He hit the bookshelf, books raining down around him. The room was quiet. Leo had collapsed on the rug, unconscious but stable. The dark smoke was gone. The windows were broken, the wind whistling through the jagged glass, bringing the smell of the sea and the rain into the room. Draco stood panting, his chest heaving, sweat dripping from his nose. His heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs, not from exertion, but from the shock of the revelation. It wasn't a suspicion anymore. It wasn't a theory. He had seen it. He had felt it. He looked at the boy, his son. His son. The love that surged up in him was immediate and terrifying. But then, a heartbeat later, came the second wave. The cold, suffocating wave of betrayal. 10 years. She had stolen 10 years. She had stolen his first words, his first steps, his first spell. She had looked him in the eye for a week and lied. She had let him think he was alone in the world, the last of a cursed line, while she raised his heir in secret. Draco slowly lifted his head. Hermione was still on the floor by the door. She was staring at him. She was pale, her eyes wide with terror. She had seen his reaction. She knew that he had seen. She scrambled to her feet, her movements jerky. Draco. Leo. Is he? He is stable, Draco said. His voice was unrecognizable. It was a dead thing, a sound from the bottom of a grave. He straightened his robes, brushing off the dust with a mechanical, jerky motion. He didn't look at Leo again. He couldn't. If he looked at the boy now, he would break down, and he needed to be angry. He needed the anger to survive this. He turned his grey eyes on Hermione. She flinched as if he had struck her. She took a step back, her hands raising in a defensive gesture. Draco, please, let me explain. Explain? Draco repeated softly. He walked toward her. He didn't rush. He moved with the predatory grace of a wolf closing in on a trap. Explain what, Granger? That you decided I was unfit? That you decided I was a monster? No, I did it to protect him. From who? Draco roared. The sound shattered the fragile quiet. From me. Hermione began to cry, the tears spilling over her cheeks. From the world. From your name. You were on trial, Draco. You were a pariah. If they knew you had a son, with a muggle born, Do you think they would have let us live in peace? Lucius would have tried to take him. The ministry would have used him. And you decided that gave you the right to play God. Draco stopped inches from her. He was shaking with rage. You decided that I didn't deserve to know? You let me rot in that manner, thinking I was the end of my line, while you kept him here, like a pet. I was going to tell you, she sobbed. I wanted to tell you. But then years passed, and it got harder, and I was so scared. You were scared, Draco scoffed, his face twisting into a cruel sneer. You are the bravest witch of your age, and you were scared of a letter. No, you weren't scared. You were selfish. That's not true, isn't it? Draco leaned down, his face close to hers. You saw how I looked at him. You saw me bonding with him. You let me fall for him, knowing that every second was a lie. You let me teach my own son as a stranger. He laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. Oil and water. You were right. We don't mix. Because you build your life on righteousness, and I build mine on survival. But at least I am honest about what I am. Draco, please. She reached for him. She tried to grab his hand, the same hand she had held on the porch, the hand that had almost touched her face in the storm. He recoiled. He pulled his hand away as if her touch were acid. Don't, he hissed. Don't you dare touch me. Hermione froze, her hand hovering in the empty air. The rejection was absolute. Draco looked at her one last time. He looked at the woman he had thought, for a brief, insane moment, might be his salvation. He saw the regret in her eyes, but it didn't matter. The betrayal was too big. It filled the room, choking out the air. He needs rest, Draco said, his voice turning cold and professional again, locking the pain away behind the occlumency walls. Give him a sleeping draught. He won't remember the pain. He won't remember me entering his mind. Where are you going? Hermione whispered. Away from you, Draco said. He turned and walked to the broken window. The wind lashed at his face, cold and biting. It felt good. It felt like reality. Draco! Hermione screamed his name. He didn't turn back. He stepped out onto the ledge into the storm. The assignment is compromised, he called out over the wind, not looking at her. I will submit my final report tomorrow. I'll tell Kingsley the boy is stable, but requires a new handler. Potter can have him. You can't leave him. He needs you. He has you, Draco said. You've done fine without me for 10 years. Keep doing it. With a sharp crack, he disapparated. He didn't go to the manor. He didn't go to his flat in London. He apparated to a cliff edge on the other side of the island, a mile away, where the sea crashed against the rocks with a violence that matched the storm inside him. He fell to his knees in the mud. The rain soaked him instantly, plastering his hair to his skull, ruining his expensive robes. He didn't care. He screamed. It was a raw, primal sound that was torn from his throat, lost instantly in the roar of the wind. He screamed for the son he had lost before he ever had him. He screamed for the 10 years of silence. He screamed for the woman who had loved him enough to save him and hated him enough to hide the best part of him away. He pounded his fist into the mud, again and again, until his knuckles bled. He is mine. The thought circled in his mind like a vulture. He is mine, and she stole him. Draco Malfoy lay in the mud, staring up at the dark, unforgiving sky. He felt the hollow ache in his chest, where his heart used to be. It had been broken before. But this was different. This was an amputation. He closed his eyes, and in the darkness he saw the boy's grey eyes again. He knew he couldn't leave. He knew he couldn't actually walk away. The bond was there now, silver and unbreakable. But he also knew he couldn't go back to that house. Not as he was. Something in him had to die tonight. The last of the hope. The last of the softness. If he was going to be a father to the child of prophecy, he couldn't be Draco Malfoy, the man who yearned for redemption. He had to be something else, something harder, something that could take what was his. The breach was open, and nothing would ever close it again. The silence that followed Draco's departure was not empty. It was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of the cottage, leaving Hermione gasping on the floor of the library, surrounded by the wreckage of her own choices. The storm outside had not abated. If anything, it had grown more vicious, the wind screaming against the stone walls like a living thing denied entry. But inside, the temperature had plummeted. Frost was beginning to creep across the floorboards, a spider web of unnatural ice that radiated from the center of the rug where Leo lay. Hermione crawled toward him. Her limbs felt heavy, leaden with grief and terror. "Leo," she whispered, her voice cracking. The boy did not wake. He was floating an inch off the floor, his small body rigid, his eyes wide open, but seeing nothing. The irises, usually a soft slate grey, were now swimming with a terrifying luminous silver. He looked less like a child and more like an artifact, a vessel filled to the brim with something ancient and indifferent to human life. "Mum." The word was a gurgle, not a call. It was the sound of someone drowning. "I'm here," Hermione sobbed, reaching for him. She tried to take his hand, to ground him with her warmth, to pour her own magic into him as a stabilizer. But as her fingers brushed his skin, she hissed in pain. He was freezing, not cold like snow, but cold like the void between stars. It burned her skin, a rejection so violent it threw her back. Her magic, golden, logical, warm, skittered off him. It couldn't find a purchase. It slid off his shields like water off oil. "Oil and water," Draco had said. "No," Hermione whimpered, scrambling back up. "No, please. Don't push me away." But Leo wasn't pushing her. He was simply elsewhere. The breach Draco had opened, the connection he had forged and then severed with his abrupt departure, had left a gaping hole in the boy's defenses. The prophecy, sensing the vulnerability, was flooding in. The room began to shake. Not the rattle of wind, but the deep, tectonic shudder of magic tearing at the seams of reality. The frost on the floor thickened, rising up the legs of the chairs, cracking the wood. The shadows in the corners of the room lengthened, detaching themselves from the walls and slithering toward the boy. "The key," Leo's voice said. It wasn't his voice. It was a chorus of whispers, overlapping, discordant. The key turns. The gate opens. "Leo, fight it!" Hermione screamed, raising her wand. She cast a containment ward, a complex weave of protective charms, but the shadows ate through it in seconds. She realized, with a clarity that stopped her heart, that she was going to lose him. She was the brightest witch of her age. She had helped defeat Voldemort. She had memorized every book in the library. But she was not enough. She had only half the equation. She had the logic, the structure, the earth. But Leo was a creature of the storm. He needed the sea. He needed the darkness to understand the light. He needed his father. "Draco!" she screamed. It was a futile, desperate sound, lost in the howling wind. "Draco, come back!" The shadows reached Leo. They began to wrap around his ankles, curling up his legs like smoke. Leo arched his back, a silent scream etched on his face. The silver in his eyes flared brighter, blindingly intense. Hermione lunged forward, ignoring the freezing burn, grabbing her son's shoulders. "Stay with me! Leo!" But the force was too strong. A pulse of raw magic exploded from the boy, throwing Hermione across the room. She hit the bookshelf hard, books cascading down on her, pain exploding in her shoulder. Through the haze of pain, she looked up. Leo was rising higher. The roof of the cottage groaned. The prophecy was trying to tear him out of this plane of existence. Then, the front door exploded. It didn't just open, it was obliterated. Splinters of oak flew into the hallway as a wave of pure kinetic force slammed into the house. The wind roared in, bringing the rain and the smell of the angry sea. And in the doorway, framed by the chaos of the storm, stood a figure in black. Draco. He looked like a wraith. His robes were soaked, plastered to his body. His hair was wild, matted with rain and mud. There was blood on his knuckles, but his eyes were burning with a cold silver fire that matched the boy's. He didn't look at Hermione. He didn't look at the wreckage of the room. He looked only at the boy hovering in the center of the vortex. "Get back," Draco commanded. His voice was low, but it cut through the magical interference like a knife. Hermione scrambled to her feet, clutching her injured arm. "Draco, he's—" "I know what he is," Draco snarled, stepping into the room. The frost on the floor hissed and retreated from his boots. "He is mine." He walked toward the vortex. The shadows that had thrown Hermione across the room lashed out at him, tendrils of dark magic seeking to strangle. Draco didn't even raise his wand. He simply slashed his hand through the air, and the shadows disintegrated, shredded by the sheer force of his will. He wasn't fighting with spells. He was fighting with authority. He was a Malfoy, scion of an ancient dark bloodline, and he was claiming his inheritance. He reached the center of the room. The air pressure was immense here, crushing. Leo was convulsing, his body caught between the human world and the void the prophecy was trying to open. Draco reached up. "Leo," he said. The name was a summons. The boy didn't respond. The chorus of whispers grew louder. "The key! The key!" "Enough!" Draco roared. He grabbed Leo's ankle and pulled. It was a physical struggle, man against magic. With a grunt of exertion, Draco dragged the boy down from the air, catching him in his arms before he hit the floor. He fell to his knees, cradling the boy against his chest. But the magic didn't stop. It was inside Leo now, a poison trying to burn its way out. The boy was scorching hot and freezing cold at the same time. "I can't anchor him!" Draco shouted, looking up at Hermione for the first time. His face was a mask of terrified fury. "The breach is too wide. He doesn't know who he is anymore." "He needs a bond," Hermione cried, stumbling toward them. "The prophecy needs a price. It needs a blood sacrifice." "No sacrifice," Draco spat. "I gave enough to this world." He looked down at his son. He saw the grey eyes rolling back, the silver light consuming the pupil. He saw the boy dying. Draco made a noise, a low, animalistic growl of refusal. He bit into his own thumb, hard enough to draw blood. A bright crimson bead welled up. He pressed his thumb to Leo's forehead, right between the eyes. "Blood of my blood," Draco chanted, the old family magic rising up in him, archaic and powerful. "Bone of my bone." I claim you. I bind you to this earth. I bind you to this name." The blood smeared on Leo's skin, stark against the pallor. The magic reacted instantly. A silver ring of light exploded outward from where they knelt, knocking the furniture back against the walls. But Leo was still convulsing. The prophecy was fighting back. It was too strong for one wizard. It was ancient magic, older than the Malfoy line. "It's not enough!" Draco yelled, his voice straining. He looked at Hermione. "Granger, get here!" Hermione didn't hesitate. She threw herself onto the floor beside them. "What do I do?" she sobbed, her hands hovering over them. "He is the bridge," Draco shouted, his eyes locking with hers. "Iron and gold. You are the gold. I am the iron. We have to close the circuit." He reached out and grabbed Hermione's hand. His grip was bruising, desperate. His hand was cold, wet with rain and blood. Her hand was warm, trembling. "Touch him," Draco commanded. "Touch him and push everything you have into him. Don't think, just feel." Hermione placed her free hand on Leo's chest, right over his heart. Draco placed his hand over hers. 3 heartbeats, 3 magical signatures. The circuit closed. It was a sensation of pure, blinding light. Hermione gasped as she felt Draco's magic rush into her. Not the dark, oily feeling she had feared, but a rush of cold, salt spray power, immense and deep. And she felt her own magic, the warm, steady, golden hum of logic and life, rush into him. They met in the boy. The oil and the water finally mixed. They didn't repel, they emulsified. They created a solution. The scream of the wind stopped. The shadows vanished. The frost evaporated in a hiss of steam. In the center of the room, the silver light in Leo's eyes faded, replaced by the soft, confused grey of a frightened child. The tension went out of his small body. He slumped against Draco's chest, taking a huge, gasping breath of air. "Dad?" Leo whispered. The word hung in the silence, heavier than the storm, louder than the prophecy. Draco froze. He looked down at the boy in his arms. The anger in his face fractured, revealing a raw, gaping wound of love. He pulled Leo tighter, burying his face in the boy's wet, dark curls. His shoulders shook. "I've got you!" Draco choked out. "I've got you! You're safe!" Hermione sat back on her heels, watching them. Her hand was still tingling from the connection. She felt drained, hollowed out, but the terror was gone. She watched Draco Malfoy hold their son. She saw the way his large hand cupped the back of Leo's head, protecting him from the world. She saw the way he rocked him, a rhythmic, instinctive motion. She had kept them apart for 10 years. She had thought she was saving them. But watching them now, fused together by magic and blood, she realized she had been starving them. Draco stayed like that for a long time, until Leo's breathing evened out into the deep rhythm of sleep. The exhaustion of the magical expenditure had knocked the boy out. Slowly, Draco lifted his head. The room was destroyed. Books were scattered everywhere. The window was a jagged hole. The door was gone. Draco shifted, lifting Leo easily into his arms. He stood up, wincing slightly as his weight settled on his bad leg, but he didn't falter. He looked at Hermione. She remained on the floor, looking up at him. She expected him to yell. She expected him to leave. She expected the hatred she had seen in his eyes earlier to return. But the eyes that met hers were not hateful. They were exhausted. They were old, and they were terrifyingly clear. "He called me Dad," Draco said. His voice was flat, devoid of inflection, but his eyes were searching hers, daring her to deny it. "He knows," Hermione whispered. Deep down, the magic told him. The magic, Draco repeated bitterly. The magic is smarter than us, it seems. He walked over to the sofa, which had miraculously survived the blast, and laid Leo down gently. He pulled a throw blanket over the boy, tucking it under his chin with painstaking care. He brushed a curl off Leo's forehead, his finger lingering on the smear of blood, the seal of the bond. Then he turned to face Hermione. He didn't offer her a hand up. He stood tall, the master of the room, the wreckage of the cottage framing him like a war zone. This ends now, Draco said. Hermione slowly stood up, using the wall for support. What ends? The hiding, the lies, the assignment. Draco took a step toward her. The energy radiating off him was immense. He was a charged weapon. I am not his handler, Hermione. I am not his teacher, and I am certainly not a ministry secret. I know, she said, bowing her head. I know, Draco. You don't get to decide anymore, he continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous, intimate register. You made the decisions for 10 years. You decided who he was. You decided who I was. You were wrong. I was trying to protect. You failed. He cut her off brutally. Look around you. You cannot protect him from what he is, and you cannot protect him from me. He closed the distance between them. He was so close she could smell the rain, the blood, and the ozone on his skin. He towered over her, casting a shadow that felt like a cage and a shield. He is a Malfoy, Draco said. The prophecy nearly ate him because he was unbalanced. He was all Granger, all light, all logic. He needs the dark, Hermione. He needs the shadow to define the light. He needs me. Yes, she admitted, the tear sliding down her cheek. He needs you. And he is going to have me. Draco's gaze bore into her. I am not leaving this house. I am not leaving this island. I am going to fix the wards. I am going to fix the windows. And then I am going to teach him how to be what he is. Hermione looked at him, her heart pounding. And what about us? Draco looked at her mouth, then supped to her eyes. The anger was still there, simmering under the surface, but it was inextricably tangled with the bond they had just shared. The circuit was closed. They were linked. Us? Draco let out a short, humorless laugh. There is no us, Granger. There is you, and there is me, and there is the boy we are both bound to keep alive. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. For a second, she thought he would stroke her cheek. Instead, he gripped her chin, tilting her face up, forcing her to look at him. His touch was firm, possessive, claiming. But make no mistake, he whispered, his thumb pressing into her skin. You are bound to me now, too. The magic went through both of us. You can't run from me anymore. You can't hide him anymore. He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. You are stuck with me, he murmured. Forever. He released her abruptly and turned away. He walked to the broken doorway, raising his wand. With a sharp slash of movement, the wood flew back together, the splinters knitting themselves into a solid barrier against the night. Get some sleep, Granger, he said without looking back. We have a lot of work to do in the morning. Hermione stood in the center of the room, her hand touching the spot on her chin where he had held her. She was shaking. She had feared this moment for 10 years. She had feared his anger. She had feared his rejection. But as she looked at his back, broad, unyielding, standing guard between her family and the storm, she realized she had been wrong about the greatest fear of all. She hadn't been afraid that he would leave. She had been afraid that he would stay, because now that he was here, claiming his place with a terrifying inevitability, she knew there was no going back. The secret was dead. And the real story, the one written in blood and silver, had just begun. The morning light did not ask for permission. It simply invaded. It spilled through the repaired windows of the cottage, pale and unforgiving, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the silent air. The storm had broken in the night, leaving behind a sky of scrubbed, innocent blue and a sea that lapped against the cliffs with deceptive gentleness. Hermione Granger opened her eyes. She was lying on the sofa, covered by a heavy velvet throw that smelled of sandalwood and old magic. For a moment, the disorientation was absolute. She expected the howling wind, the crashing waves, the terrifying silver light in her son's eyes. But there was only silence and the smell of coffee. She sat up abruptly, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She looked toward the stairs. The door to Leo's room was open. "He's asleep," a voice said from the kitchen doorway. "I checked 5 minutes ago." Hermione froze. She turned her head slowly. Draco Malfoy was leaning against the doorframe. He looked devastatingly human. He had shed the heavy, mud-soaked outer robes of the night before. He was wearing his black trousers and a white dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing the dark mark on his left arm, faded but visible. He held a mug of steaming coffee in his hand. He didn't look angry. He didn't look like the vengeful wraith who had torn the door off its hinges. He looked tired. There were dark bruises of exhaustion under his eyes, and the stubble on his jaw was stark against his pale skin. But he was there. He hadn't left. "You're still here," Hermione whispered, the words scratching her dry throat. "Where else would I be?" Draco replied calmly. He walked into the room, his limp slightly more pronounced in the morning chill. He extended the mug toward her. "Drink. You look terrible." Hermione took the mug, her fingers brushing against his. The contact sent a jolt of static through her, a remnant of the magical circuit they had closed last night. It wasn't painful anymore. It was a hum, a low-frequency vibration that told her exactly where he was in the room, even if she closed her eyes. "I thought," she started, staring down into the black liquid. "I thought you would take him, or leave. I thought you hated me." Draco walked to the window, looking out at the sea. The morning light caught the silver of his signet ring. "I do hate you, a little," he said, his voice devoid of heat. "For the time. 10 years, Hermione. You stole 10 years." "I know." "But," he turned back to face her, his grey eyes piercing, "hating you takes a lot of energy, and I am going to need all my energy for him." He nodded toward the ceiling, toward the sleeping boy. "The bond held?" Hermione asked, terrified of the answer. "It held," Draco said. "He is anchored. The prophecy is dormant. It recognizes the bloodline now. It won't try to eat him again, provided he's trained properly, which he will be." "By you," she stated. "By me." Draco walked over to the armchair opposite her, the one he had occupied during their days of chess and tension, and sat down. He looked at her, really looked at her, with a clinical, intense scrutiny that made her skin prickle. "We need to establish the parameters of this arrangement," he said. "Arrangement? I am not a weekend father, Granger. I am not a visitor. The ministry thinks this is an assignment. I am telling you, it is a relocation. I am moving in." Hermione's breath hitched. Draco, you can't just live here. The cottage is small. We have a history. We have a son, he corrected sharply. And we have a dangerous magical anomaly that requires constant stabilizing. Do you think I trust anyone else to do this? Do you think I'm going to go back to the manor and wait for your owl telling me he's exploded again? No, she whispered. Then I stay. I take the guest room. I fix the wards. I handle the ministry. You handle the boy's heart. I handle his power. It was logical. It was necessary. It was everything she had been terrified of, and everything she had secretly wanted since the moment she saw the double blue lines on the pregnancy test. And us? Hermione asked. The question hung in the air, fragile as glass. How do we exist? Draco went quiet. He looked down at his hands, the hands that had pulled their son from the void. He flexed his fingers, as if testing their strength. That morning, he said softly. 10 years ago. Hermione flinched. Draco, don't. Why did you run? He asked. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the past. You said last night it was because you were scared. But that's not the whole truth, is it? You're a Gryffindor. You run toward fire, not away from it. Hermione gripped the mug tighter, the ceramic hot against her palms. I didn't run because I was scared of the fire, Draco. I ran because I knew it would burn everything down. She looked up at him, her eyes filling with tears. We were on opposite sides of a war that had just ended. The world wanted us to be enemies. If I had stayed, if we had tried, the pressure would have destroyed us. You needed to heal. I needed to find myself. If we had started then, we would have ended in hatred. So you chose silence, Draco murmured. You chose a clean break. I chose to save the memory, she confessed. I wanted that night to be perfect. I didn't want it to become just another casualty of the war. Draco finally looked at her. His expression softened, the hard lines of his face relaxing into something that looked painfully like regret. And instead, you created a ghost. I've been haunted by you for a decade, Hermione. I woke up every morning reaching for you. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Draco stood up. He crossed the small space between them. He didn't stop at the edge of the coffee table. He walked until he was standing directly in front of her. He took the mug from her hands and set it aside. Stand up, he said. Hermione obeyed. Her legs were shaky, but she stood. She was close enough to smell him now. The clean soap, the coffee, the underlying scent of the storm that seemed to cling to his soul. I don't want your apology, Draco said low, his voice vibrating in her chest. Apologies are for mistakes. Leo is not a mistake. We are not a mistake. We are just late. He reached out and touched her face. His hand was warm, calloused, real. He traced the line of her jaw, his thumb resting on her lower lip. It was the same touch from the night before, but without the anger. This was a claim. You were right, he whispered, his eyes searching hers. If we had tried then, we would have failed. We were too broken. I was too weak. You were never weak, she breathed. I was, he corrected. I needed to be alone. I needed to become this. He gestured vaguely to himself, to the hardness, the scars, the man who could stare down a prophecy. I needed to become the man who could protect him, and you needed to become the mother who could save him. And now? Hermione asked, her voice trembling. Now, Draco said, his hand sliding into her hair, gripping the back of her neck. I am done waiting. He lowered his head. The kiss was not an explosion. It wasn't the frantic, desperate collision of 10 years ago. It was slow. It was heavy. It tasted of inevitability. Draco's mouth moved over hers with a deliberate, possessive pressure. He wasn't asking for permission. He was confirming a fact. "You are mine," the kiss said. "The boy is mine. The past is ours." Hermione made a soft sound in her throat and melted into him. Her hands found their way to his shoulders, gripping the fabric of his shirt. It felt like coming home. It felt like the final piece of the puzzle snapping into place. The resonance between them, the iron and the gold, flared up, not as a weapon this time, but as a warm, golden light that wrapped around them. It was a confirmation. The magic approved. Draco pulled back just an inch, his forehead resting against hers. His breathing was ragged. "I am not leaving," he said again, his voice rough. "Do you understand? You can be angry at me. You can yell at me. But I am not going anywhere. I don't want you to go anywhere," Hermione admitted, closing her eyes. "I'm tired of being the only one holding the sky up." "Then let it drop," Draco murmured. "I've got it." A creak on the stairs broke the moment. They didn't jump apart. They didn't scramble to hide. Draco simply turned his head, keeping his arm wrapped securely around Hermione's waist. Leo was standing on the bottom step. He was wearing his pajamas, his hair a riot of curls. He looked small but healthy. The grey eyes were clear, the silver gone. He was clutching his wooden dragon. He looked at his mother. Then he looked at the tall blonde man holding her. He didn't look surprised. He looked relieved. "Is breakfast ready?" Leo asked. Draco let out a short, incredulous laugh, a sound that was genuine and bright. "Priorities," he muttered. "A true Malfoy." "I made pancakes," Draco said to the boy, "though I cannot vouch for their structural integrity. Your mother's kitchen supplies are woefully inadequate." Leo grinned. It was a shy, sleepy smile. He walked into the living room, bypassing his mother to stand in front of Draco. He looked up. "Are you staying?" Leo asked. "For real?" Draco released Hermione and crouched down, bringing himself to eye level with his son. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look at Hermione for confirmation. "Yes, Leo," Draco said firmly. "For real." "Good," Leo said, "because the magic is quiet when you're here." Draco swallowed hard. He reached out and squeezed the boy's shoulder. "It will stay quiet. I promise." Leo nodded, satisfied. He turned and marched into the kitchen. "I want syrup. The good kind." Draco stayed crouched for a moment longer. He looked at the floor where he had knelt the night before, where he had bled to save his son. Then he stood up and looked at Hermione. The tension was gone. The fear was gone. In its place was something terrified and new, a future that hadn't existed yesterday. "Breakfast," Draco said, adjusting his cuffs, retreating into his sarcasm to hide the depth of his emotion. "And then, Granger, you are going to show me where you keep the actual tea, because that dust you serve is an insult to the British Empire." Hermione laughed. It was a wet, shaky sound, but it was real. "I'll see what I can do." She watched him walk into the kitchen, heard him talking to Leo about the proper viscosity of syrup. She looked out the window at the calm sea. The secret was dead. The lie was over. She touched her lips where the ghost of his kiss still lingered. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were still ministry reports to fake, prejudices to navigate, and a prophecy to manage. There were 10 years of missing memories to fill. But as Hermione walked toward the kitchen, toward the sound of her son's laughter and the man who had finally come home, she knew one thing for certain. They had survived the night, and for the first time in a very long time, she wasn't afraid of the morning.
This story is about secrets. It is about the time we lose and the love we cannot hide. Draco and Hermione were enemies. Then they were a memory. Finally, they become a family. It is a story після a family. In this story, magic is not just about spells. Magic in the truth. It is the look in a child's eyes. It is the touch that says, I'm here. I believe that love is never too late. Sometimes we must break to become strong. Sometimes we must lose everything to find what is real. Thank you for listening about Draco, Hermione, and Leo. The storm is over now. The sun is out, and they are home. Thank you for being part of this magical journey. Тут тільки